Hello and welcome to episode 0 of AARGH, My Optics, a brand new podcast where we discuss, overanalyze and generally take a kids' cartoon and toy line a little too seriously. That cartoon and toy line being predominantly but not exclusively Transformers. I am your host, Orion Ghia, or at least that's what I'm choosing to call myself, and with me is my young co-host, Virtual Dave, also not his real name. Say hello to our listeners, Dave, and tell them a little bit about your relationship with our beloved robots in disguise.
Hello, guys. I'm Virtual Dave, and I love Transformers. Now, I've been a fan for many years, and can't wait to do this.
Yeah, me too. I gave the impression that you were young. I am considerably older than you, and have been into Transformers since it began. So, 1984. And my experience is very much from that point, from the Marvel comics, the movie, and getting the toys as a kid. Then in recent years, I've kind of gotten back into it, which is a couple of times, in fact, which is why we're now doing this. So, well, our first episode is going to be about War for Cybertron, Earthrise, which is the second part of the War for Cybertron trilogy on Netflix. However, seeing as it's the second part, I thought we could do a bit of a chat about the first part, Siege, and just give our kind of thoughts on that and our thoughts on where we think Earthrise might go, given what we know about it. Now, we're recording this on the 28th? 28th of December. Earthrise airs on the 30th, so we have not seen it. We do not know what's going to happen, although we've got some ideas. We've seen a trailer. We've seen the entire Siege toy line. We've seen the entire Earthrise toy line. Yeah. And, we've also seen the one directly after it. In fact, you have some of the figures, don't you?
I do indeed.
So there's plenty of clues to work on. So I guess we'll get going. My optics! We watched this when it came out. When was it about? Was that about 6 months ago?
Was it that far back?
Maybe not. I'll look it up. I'll look it up later and I'll insert something. Siege debuted 30th of July 2020, so exactly 5 months ago. Anyway, whenever it was, we both watched it and had a good old chinwag about it then. Mm-hmm. And I've gone back and watched a little bit more of it again and, reviewed my thoughts on it. So I suppose we can just get into it. War for Cybertron was a 6-episode miniseries, first part of the War for Cybertron trilogy. The opening episodes lay out the kind of the backdrop. We're towards the end of a war, I think, on Cybertron. It's all pretty messed up. The Autobots appear to be losing out to the Decepticons, and they're running out of energon, which is basically their fuel, which is why plenty of the Autobots are just kind of lying around in corridors looking a bit worse for wear. The Decepticons, led by Megatron, seem to have led some kind of revolution against the Autobots and are now kind of running what can loosely be called a police state with things called surrender stations, which I find particularly interesting. And it does appear that the Seekers are kind of tasked with chasing down renegade Autobots. At least that's how the series opens, with Bumblebee and Wheeljack, which is a callback to original first episode of G1. So what were your initial thoughts, if you can remember that far back?
I really liked the animation style from the get-go with Siege. I know that a lot of people were very taken back by the fluidity of the animation itself, but I thought it was a very good improvement from what they put out before.
Yes, yeah. Well, you watched that, whereas I tolerated half an episode once, but I never really watched it. But yes, it is a marked improvement on that. Yeah.
And then we're talking about the Prime Wars trilogy that came out before, which was awful in a lot of ways. But this, from the get-go, the animation was a big improvement. In terms of the actual story, in that first episode, I thought it was interesting, and was a different start than I was expecting. Like having Bumblebee not being a part of a faction from the first episode was, has never really been done before. So it was nice to see that type of change.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, I wasn't quite as blown away by the animation as you were, but it's certainly competent. It looks pretty good. It's very kind of grim and gritty. The tone in general, I quite like the tone. I like the fact that we're moving away from the more kidsy appeal that we've seen from a lot of Transformers shows over the past, past 35 years, really. I mean, there's been the occasional dalliance into more adult stuff like Beast Wars and Beast Machines after that. But it's nice to see it kind of go back to, reattempt something a bit more adult. And yeah, the animation was fine, bit clunky in places, but definitely an improvement on what I'd seen of what had come before in the last 2 or 3 TV series, like what was it called, Mishima stuff.
Yeah,
Mishima.
Machinima.
Yeah. I mean, that was awful.
Yeah, it was. It was not great at all.
Yeah, but yeah, regards to the plot, I mean, the first episode does a lot of people talking very forcefully and slowly about what is happening and vaguely why. You have the conversation between Bumblebee and Wheeljack about they're hunting for Energon because their Autobots are low on Energon, and Bumblebee is basically like a scavenger who's been employed by the Autobots to find them some Energon.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have them have an encounter with the Seekers, which then reveals that Jetfire is the leader of the Seekers and is obviously going to defect. I mean, anybody who knows anything about Transformers is not going to be surprised by that, to be honest.
Well, it's the fact that the biggest draw for me was that his eyes were blue, and that's always an indicator to me that someone's actually going to be a good guy.
I really wish they wouldn't do that. Like, it's a little bit of a giveaway. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of clear, especially because the history of the character is, originally in G1, he was in a TV show. He was kind of fooled into joining the Decepticons, and in the comic books, I think he was created by Shockwave as a kind of like almost like a drone, and then later given life by the Creation Matrix. And it wasn't until after that he switched sides to the Autobots. So this has happened a few times before, so it's not unsurprising. Anyway, you got that. And you've got him having an argument with Starscream. Obviously, Starscream wants to be in charge. Again, what a surprise. And then we have Megatron turn up. He does some kind of explaining about how he had some kind of revolt. And he seems to want to win Wheeljack over, but only a little bit.
I found it interesting that Megatron was quite diplomatic for a lot of the first few episodes. He wasn't, your typical gun-ho, I'm just going to kill you. He actually asked people, do you want to switch sides? Are you sure this is what you want to do?
Yeah, he did.
Not even in a threatening way most of the time. He was just generally like, are you sure? I mean...
I think he sort of flip-flopped backwards and forwards. I mean, there were times when he definitely kind of like appeared to be trying to be more diplomatic, and then he'd kind of switch and become quite murderous.
Yeah.
But I guess that's part of his story. So you get that, and then you get Optimus Prime turn up, and then they have a big kind of chin wag with each other as to why they don't agree with each other, which for me didn't land too well because they never explain what really happened in the past. I mean, the episodes are only 20 minutes long, aren't they?
It's short,
25 minutes long?
About 20 minutes.
Yeah, I think the first 15 to 20 minutes of that episode is just people kind of explaining stuff with not an awful lot of action.
I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing, though, but...
No, not at all.
I thought it was a bit strange that they seem to have really weakened Optimus Prime in this series as well. Like, I wouldn't have thought Prime would have had a problem taking on Megatron on his own. It's not like all of the Decepticons that were there were fighting him, I mean, he couldn't stand up to Megatron, even at any point in the series, really. He gets his butt handed to him a couple of times.
Yeah. Well, I didn't hate that. I thought that was all right, because they're doing the groundwork of laying down that the Autobots aren't really warriors.
Yeah, I get that, but I mean, a lot of the Autobots are like competent to some degree on the battlefield. I feel like it wasn't a lack of experience. It was just gun ho. I don't even know what you would call it.
You get the impression from this that the storyline's slightly different here. Not necessarily slightly different, but I think Red Alert says, "Oh, before this, I was a doctor, and then the war happened, and they put a blaster in my hand, and now I'm a warrior."
Oh, yeah.
I think that the majority of the Autobots are civilians, and that plays into the whole kind of functionist idea that they're going with, which they kind of borrowed off of IDW.
Orion Ghia is referring to IDW Publishing, the current license holder for the Transformers comic book.
Megatron says that he and his Decepticons were all working in Energon mines and gladiatorial pits and so on, and that there was some kind of a preordained function for them due to how they were born, or what alt mode they had, which does happen in IDW. It's a very similar kind of idea. That's what he rebelled against, and the Autobots were the kind of ruling class. Which again, I would like to have heard a lot more about that, but it's very kind of like just hinted at. I think Impactor talks about it a bit as well, a few episodes later.
Yeah, he does. Yeah,
but that's the stuff that I would have liked to have seen a bit more of. It was always kind of in the background there, and it felt like it would be important to know what that is to understand why the war's happening.
It does raise the question to more of like who's really the good guys and who's really the bad guys in the story, because the way Siege laid it out, it did feel more that the Autobots were not always as good as they are making them out themselves to be. It was more there's a reason they're in the predicament they're in now.
Yeah, I think the main reason the Autobots are in the predicament they're in is because they've got such a terrible leader.
Well, there is that too. Yeah.
Optimus is crap. He refuses to explain anything to anybody. He's shushing people when they've got something important to say.
Like Wheeljack for like 5 episodes.
He's like, Wheeljack's like going, Prime. There's a space bridge. It's like, no, I don't want to know about it. You'll have to tell me later. People are questioning him, and he's just going, you're just going to have to trust me. And then he walks into an obvious trap.
More than once. It's not even he learned from the first time.
Yeah, and at no point does he show any remorse for doing so. He's just like, oh, fine, get on with it. No, you still have to follow me. I'm surprised he's got any troops left. Yeah, he is a bit, dumb.
That's why I didn't understand from it. That's why I have a problem with him being so weak. At this point, Grimlock would be a better leader for the Autobots. He can back up what he's going to be saying when he comes to fighting, because Prime is not like he has to be a tactician or he has to know how to fight exactly, but at least use all your weapons. He had many chances to use his axe to save his life and he didn't use it.
It appears that he's the leader because he has the matrix of leadership.
Yep.
Only because of that. He hasn't actually got any real leadership qualities. Whereas Megatron's got loads. Megatron makes sense.
That might be it. That might be why he's such a bad leader in Siege, because his toy does not come with the Matrix. He just has an empty cavity. That's why.
I think that's it. Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, I suppose that could be it. I mean, he's all right in places, but he's not a particularly sympathetic character.
No.
And if he's meant to be the hero of the piece, I think they made a bit of a misstep there.
My optics!
I thought that Bumblebee was meant to be the hero. at first, or rather was going to become the hero.
Mm.
And it was kind of going down that route. You thought he was going to be won over by the Autobots and become, dedicated to the Autobot cause because he's shown something that changes his mind. But instead, magic does it. And then it's like, oh, I've magically got all this Alpha Trion protocol in my mind now, so I best be on your side.
And he doesn't even get to use it. He doesn't get to do anything with it.
Well, all it really is a map to the Allspark, isn't it? Really, that's all it.
But even that was very vague. They still needed Jetfire to help them Jetfire.
Yeah, but if Ultra Magnus had this in his head all along, then why didn't he take him to the Allspark?
I don't know. It's like, we talked about that before. It didn't make sense why he was so worried that they were going to find it if he knew where it was going to be anyway.
He also, I'm pretty sure he warned Optimus Prime that the Decepticons were looking for the Allspark before the Decepticons said they were looking for the Allspark.
Yep.
So it was like, what, are you a clairvoyant? I actually think that's something to do with the editing, though, because there were bits here and there where it felt like they'd removed a scene or changed a scene or edited a scene in a certain way, and then they forgot to like reorganize the dialogue.
Yeah.
So there were bits where things just kind of felt clunky and weird, and someone would say something and then the response wouldn't really sound like something that should be in response to that line.
Mm.
I think there's a bit where when Bumblebee gets taken back to like the AARGH, because they've got the AARGH, haven't they, hidden behind this kind of holographic wall. They go back to the AARGH and Bumblebee's kind of chatting to Red Alert and Elita 1 and so on. Optimus Prime just walks into the room and he says something like,
Bumblebee. Is it?
No.
No.
No, I'm not signing up for your fight.
I don't understand that conversation. What does is it mean?
I think you're probably right. I think it probably would be something to do with the editing, because of the way they recorded the audio for this. It was all during what was happening in the year.
I assume that it wasn't all done it wasn't like in a big room or anything. But that's how a lot of audio is done for a lot of TV shows. It's a lot of animated TV shows these days anyway. It's unusual. You get kind of what they did with Beast Wars, where they had everyone in the same room.
I get the feeling that they must have had run into issues because, like we talked about before, it's wasn't going alongside the toy line. Like it got released during halfway through Earthrise. Oh, that was the toy line was coming out, so it was way behind where it should have been. Yeah, you'd think 35 years in, Hasbro could get this right. It is very strange that the toys were all out already. Yeah, because with the previous trilogy, they did kind of do that right. They did have the series come out alongside the toys. Yeah, and that would make sense commercially, wouldn't it, really? Put out this clearly fairly big budget Netflix show. I mean, this looks a lot better than those previous shows. There's some problems with it, but it's definitely a cut above that stuff. So you spent all this money on this TV show, but you put the toy line out a year before? It's confusing. They haven't learned from that mistake because they're doing a BotBot show now. Yeah, they are, aren't they? 2 years after the toys came out. I was actually thinking the other day, before I saw that the BotBots TV show, we're going on a tangent here, but when I saw that the BotBots TV show was coming out, maybe 2 days previously, I'd been thinking, are BotBots a thing anymore, or are they finished? I had the same thought. My optics! Anyway, back to the deeply serious Siege. There's not a lot of transforming, is there? No. I think Megatron transforms once. I think Optimus maybe a couple of times. I don't think B ever transforms. No. The Seekers do, Jetfire does, but that's because they've got aerial modes. Elita 1 doesn't either. She's quite prominent. Yeah. It's for a show called Transformers.
There's not a lot of transforming going on.
It's very strange because it's like that old thing about in an old cartoon where you can tell a rock is about to get smashed because it stands out.
Yes.
A lot of the Transformers who don't transform are not ones that are based on toys, so they just didn't bother having that in the story.
Yeah.
So therefore they stand out.
And that all plays back to the lack of synchronicity between the toy line and the TV show.
Yeah.
My optics!
Yeah, I think we kind of struck on the fact that the character of Prime is he's flawed, and I understand and appreciate the idea of trying to make him a flawed, slightly reluctant leader, but you also have to make him likable.
Yeah, because like what you have with Optimus Primal in those first seasons.
Virtual Dave is referring to Transformers Beast Wars, the greatest Transformers TV show ever made.
He was very inexperienced, and none of them were fighters either, but at least he could handle the conflict with him and Megatron a lot easier than this Prime can.
I mean, just compare those first two episodes of Beast Wars to this first episode of or first two episodes even of Siege. You have Optimus Primal looking completely out of his depth, not really knowing what to do, getting berated by his crew, particularly Rat Trap.
Yeah.
But by the end of the second episode, he's won over the respect of Dinobot.
Yeah.
You've got something to latch onto there. You can see why Optimus Primal is an interesting character, or a character that might have more to him. The Optimus Prime of Siege doesn't really ever do that.
I mean, even if people wanted to make the comparison with another Optimus Prime, even animated Prime is very similar in that aspect.
Yes.
In their first episode, he goes toe-to-toe with Megatron and still is able to get his team to safety and do the whole thing about living on Earth.
Yeah. Exactly. And a lot of TV shows do that. The main character or the leader proves their worth within the space of the first episode or two. I think with Siege being a Netflix series and being a bit more long form, I think what they wanted to do was have him have a journey from episode 1 through to episode 6. And by episode 6, reach that point. But I'm not sure whether he actually did.
No. If anything, at the end, they kind of recreated that whole fight in the movie where he's getting beaten up and Bumblebee comes and saves him instead of Hot Rod.
Yeah, but it was kind of an Easter egg, wasn't it? A kind of nod to. I mean, those last couple of episodes. I mean, the big epic fight at the end was pretty good.
Yeah, it was a really good ending, I thought, because it made me want to watch what was coming.
Absolutely. I think they got that going very well, and there's a bunch of great, interesting characters. Sadly, Optimus Prime's just not one of them. But I think Megatron's very interesting. I want to know about his history. I want to know how he rose to power and why.
Mm-hmm.
Elita 1, who seems like a better leader than Prime, to be honest, and is set up at the end of the series as being leading the resistance on Cybertron, because everyone else is off on the Ark somewhere.
I actually like that they did that and had obviously going to have him run-ins with Shockwave.
Yeah.
So it's very calls back to that U1 roots.
Yes. Yeah.
I really like that one scene with Shockwave telling Megatron that he has a virus that will solve all of his problems.
Mm-hmm.
This is all these problems he just had like this random test that he was already doing behind Megatron's back to all these different things. I like that aspect of his character coming through of just this mad genius who just has all these things.
It felt really tarantulas.
Yeah, very tarantulas, actually, yeah.
Tarantulas is a character from Transformers Beast Wars, the greatest Transformers TV show ever made.
Really, like I'm just getting on with this shit in the background. I'm not really that bothered about your war.
I just really like they captured that small little thing from his character, and it was fine. That's all you need, really. It's not.
There's some interesting characters there. I mean, There was some good stuff with Ratchet. I really liked Ratchet's kind of backstory. That was kind of interesting.
I did feel that was, it would have made to me, it would have made more sense if it was the other way around, and Wheeljack was this barren inventor who was legendary, and Ratchet was the medic.
Well,
but I get why they did it.
Well, I mean that they did mix up people's roles a bit. Like I said we get back to it in a way. The idea of Red Alert being a doctor is like, well, why? Is it just because he's white and red?
He was an emergency service vehicle. That means he must do all of that stuff.
But it's, I mean, for a start, in a fire department Lamborghini doesn't make an awful lot of sense. But nonetheless, he isn't associated with the medical field.
My optics!
Well, let's talk about the voice acting and the soundtrack. It was one of the weakest points of it, to be honest.
What, the sound in general?
I mean, the sound's fine. The soundtrack's generic.
Very.
Even, the titles and the end titles aren't particularly memorable or interesting. Just kind of there. And I know it's a Netflix series and you skip past that anyway. Everyone hits, skip titles. But at the same time, you look back at previous Transformers series and they've been known for their theme tunes.
I think it's a big loss and a missed opportunity, because the opportunity to have an animated intro at this quality or this time could be very memorable for people, even children who would be watching it. And it's not got any of that. It's not.
It's nothing.
I mean, to be fair, it's happening to a lot of kids shows these days, to be honest. But the magic of an intro is kind of fading away, and it's pretty sad.
True. You don't walk away from it humming anything. There's so many shows where you have a theme or a piece of thematic music that will play at different points, and that piece of music, and that piece of music is going to play at this particular point. You've got it obviously in things like Star Wars. You've got it in Star Trek. Like, you've got it in all sorts of TV series where, I mean, even the old Transformers series had them as well, like the original 80s one. Mm-hmm. There wasn't any of that. It was all very kind of bland.
Even for like the Unicron trilogy, when they would have a massive transformation scene and it would be all glam and neon lights and sorts, there'd be a Transformers song, and it was great. It was.
Yeah, I suppose maybe this has got something to do with the kind of the dark and gritty tone we were talking about earlier, which we enjoyed. Maybe that's why they went for a more kind of subdued soundtrack, because what you're talking about probably wouldn't have worked in Siege, because it was very over the top and Japanese.
I suppose, yeah, not the flashing lights and all sorts, but I think as a song for fight scenes at least, or for when evil things are happening or when good things are happening, would have been welcome.
Well, I agree, and I think that there was a lack of drama.
Yeah,
a lot of the time, and talking like this doesn't necessarily equate to drama, and especially when everyone talks like that.
I didn't notice it as much when I watched it the first time. But it's only when people highlighted the delivery of the lines, I was like, maybe that's how people speak on Cybertron. Maybe, I don't know.
Well, yeah, maybe, but it's just like, it would have been fine if you had maybe it was used in the right places, but it was used all the time by most of the characters, and it meant everyone just sounded very, very one note a lot of the time. There are a few exceptions, but if you were looking away from the screen, you wouldn't know who was talking necessarily sometimes. Yeah,
I would say that it was a bit jarring for some of the voice actors they chose for the certain characters. Like Ironhide is a good example. He sounds nothing like Ironhide should, in my opinion.
I mean, that's fine. I don't have such a problem with that, because we don't have to retread this stuff all the time.
when I say that, I mean it stands out a lot more when there is a kind of half and half. Like pretty much all the Decepticons sound right, and
Yes, that's true.
it's a bit wishy-washy with the Autobots. Like Wheeljack is pretty spot on, I would say, but
Yeah, it's close enough.
everyone else is a bit. Could we not try a bit more? Because the Decepticon guys are Starscream's crushing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you say Soundwave was a bit sketchy.
Okay, yeah, Soundwave. But I didn't mind that as much because it fits him to be a bit different in that way. I feel like it's been more of a thing in his shows recently because since animated, he's had more auto tune with his speech, and then he did it in Prime.
All right. So maybe that is a thing with Soundwave. But yeah, I agree. Overall, the Decepticons sounded like they needed to sound. It was the Autobots that are a bit more sketchy. But yeah, I mean, I just thought the voice acting was quite pedestrian. I mean, no one really stood out except maybe Sound Blaster because he was so mental.
Yeah, that was a nice addition that I really liked. It was probably the most toy advert part of the series. I was like, "You've got me."
Yeah, yeah, it was a bit, wasn't it? But it was refreshing because so much of it is very serious and very kind of one tone that to get a kind of slightly wackier character was nice. Yeah. It would have liked to see a bit more of that. But yeah, I mean, I think mostly the voice acting was acceptable but not brilliant, and they weren't helped by the fact that a lot of the dialogue was a bit clunky and uninspired, and there were bits where, like we spoke about before, bits where things seemed to be edited out, so people said the wrong words or said something that didn't sound quite right, and also bits where there were a few times where Optimus Prime shouted, and that didn't work.
Didn't sound right, did it?
No, and you did it for no reason most of the time.
My optics!
So we've spoken about what we know about the war, which is not an awful lot, which I think is why a lot of it doesn't land for me, because it would be nice to have earned the audience's investment in what was going on. Because even by the end of it, I still didn't really know why they were fighting each other.
Yeah.
Why did Megatron kill Alpha Trion? What was Megatron's revolution about? Was he right? Because it sounds like he might have been. What's Prime's beef with Megatron other than he killed Alpha Trion? Is that it? Because if so, he's on some kind of weird, selfish revenge tip.
It did feel like that at points, because it's very rare for Prime to be such a. I mean, it felt more like movie Prime, if anything. He doesn't have any type of. He didn't even want to like speak to Megatron or hear what he had to say.
No, he wasn't interested.
He really didn't give him a chance. Even when Elita 1 was talking to him about the issues they were having, it was like, I don't want to hear about it. It's my plan. This is what we're doing.
Exactly, he did that so often. And I hate to keep going back to him, but if you make it a Transformers series, it kind of lives and dies by the portrayal of Prime, doesn't it, really? You would have thought.
Yeah, the two of them being like the good portrayal, the good and bad.
Yeah, and Megatron was a really interesting character, and I really want to know more about him and about why he's the person he is and why he's doing what he's doing.
It's very similar to the Machinima series in that sense, because Prime, he would do things that didn't feel like it would be a Prime thing to do. It was always not well thought out, whereas Megatron in that series as well was, I mean, no spoilers or anything, but Prime dies in the Machinima series, and Megatron has to kind of take over.
He always does these days.
But Megatron does...
Ever since that movie, Prime will now die and everything.
It has to happen. Need that black repaint.
It's like we've got no new ideas.
Anyway,
Go on.
Megatron takes over, and he does such a better job of leading this ragtag team of Autobots to save Cybertron and, get the job done.
Yeah.
And it does make you wonder if Megatron was not meant to be leader all the time, because he actually does a good job at it.
Well, yeah.
Even when he's talking to the Decepticons, they all give him advice about what he should do, and he kind of sits and listens, ponders it. Yeah, you know what? I'll take your idea on board.
I think we've got James Roberts to blame for all this. He made, I mean, well, not just James Roberts, actually, just the writing team on IDW. They made Megatron a sympathetic character.
Yep.
They made him a freedom fighter. They made him a revolutionary, which has definitely been brought through into the Siege series. And they gave him a reason, an understandable reason, to rebel against the Autobots. Yep. Basically, they've cast him as a kind of a blue-collar guy who rebels against the ruling class. And that's something that they've really successfully done that, but in a way, it's at the detriment of Prime's character.
I think that it's been it's what this really needs, because you need that whole Orion Pax dynamic of him dying by Megatron's hands to come back, and that would be his, you know, the story that they would be entwined together because one created the other.
Absolutely. And Prime has also got that working class, as it were, background. Yeah. Orion Pax was a nobody. Maybe they should delve into that a bit more, because otherwise he just looks like a self-important arsehole.
My optics!
Well, we're going to get onto it in a bit, but I'm hoping that in Earthrise we're going to get a bit more of their backstories, and therefore we're going to be able to kind of pull that together, and maybe we'll be able to see Prime as a more sympathetic character, and we'll be able to understand where both of them have come from. Because at the moment, it's all very good. The setup's really good. I like the tone. I like where we're going with it. But it doesn't feel like the good guys really have a focus.
Yeah.
And okay, Megatron randomly goes a bit mental in this and decides he's going to reformat all the Autobots into Decepticons, whatever that means. which is another little issue I have, in that the series does appear to not, it's not clear, or it's either not clear or doesn't really care or doesn't really know what the difference between an Autobot and a Decepticon is.
Yes.
Every now and again, someone will refer to destroying the Autobots as genocide or something. And it's like, well, so what? They're a race? So you're two distinct races? And then other times they'll be referred to as factions. And then you've got Bumblebee, who's neither. So what is he?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of contradictory language around what an Autobot and a Decepticon is.
Yeah, even a class of it being something you're created into or built into, or is it a choice?
Exactly. You'd think you're all Cybertronians,
right?
And or Transformers, and you decide what side you're going to be on, you know, like regular folk.
Yep. It was even the stuff about the Seekers were like so against that idea of them changing the Autobots over. They were like, how dare they filthy the ranks with Autobots? Or
yeah, there was some kind of Starscream came out with a bit of kind of Aryan kind of nonsense, didn't he? So what are Decepticons? Again, maybe they'll make that clearer later on, but I don't think they will. I think they'll probably, right, okay, before we get into what we think is going to happen in Earthrise, I think we've basically talked through what we didn't like. But let's just do a kind of an overview of, so what were your favourite things, Dave, of this particular series? What did you like most about it?
What I liked most was the animation and the overall backgrounds and stuff. Like, it was a lot. The series felt more populated, like a more populated Cybertron, without there actually being any population in Cybertron. If that makes sense. It felt more like there was war that had happened, and there were like the buildings were all falling apart, and things were all dying, or had repeats of Ironhide and Sideswipe in the background, all falling apart. I found that interesting that they at least tried to do that, because they don't, when it happens, they go to Cybertron, it's all very neat, it's all very clean, it's imply loads of people around, but you never see anyone.
Yeah, and usually that's to do with budgetary constraints, isn't it? But yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean.
I like to know that they tried to at least hide that fluff with that type of aesthetic in the background. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it did feel quite epic in scope. It felt like a really serious war had happened, and there was quite a bit of world building. I felt that there was quite lots of kind of going on in the background. And even though, we still had quite a small cast, really, they gave the impression of there being a lot of people about.
I did like that. And I like that the characters they kind of picked to do it. And like I guess we can talk more about that at the end, but I find that being more of a worry in Earthrise, where there's clearly whoever the Quintessons are working with have a sea of Ironhide clones, which is very weird to me. I always thought they would have the Alicons with them, but
oh, do they? I didn't know. I didn't spot that.
Yeah, it's a very like I can accept it for Cybertron that there would be multiple versions of people, but if they carry on doing it when they go to other planets, I would have more of a problem with that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's par for the course, isn't it? Really. I mean, you go back to G1 and you've got countless various coloured Seekers and various coloured Datsuns in the background, haven't you? So, like, these things happen. So it's But yeah, I know what you mean. If it's off-world, then you wouldn't expect that. But yeah, I agree. I thought that was really good.
Oh, actually, and the Sea of Rust scene was was amazing. Like the type of, because normally when they go there, it's very a dark and dismal place, but it was almost like a Mad Max scene,
Yes, yeah. I thought that the general tone was good. I thought it was reasonable. I thought it was good, but I didn't think it was amazing. I think that if they put a little bit more into their backgrounds, but I imagine this might happen later. And also if the voice acting were a bit better, I think it would have elevated it.
My optics!
Right. So I mean, I think we've covered how we felt about it overall. So if you were to give the series a rating, and we could go with a scale of 1 to 10 or 1 to 5, but that's a bit boring. So I think what we're going to use is the well-known scale of Wheelie to name your favorite character in the 1986 movie, which for me would probably be Galvatron. But I don't know. There's a few contenders, but Wheelie's definitely the worst.
It's the worst, yeah.
Yeah, we can all agree. So where would you place War for Cybertron, Siege on that scale?
I would place Siege, ironically, at a solid Springer, because I look forward to there being more to see, and given the fact that Springer's a triple changer, it seems appropriate for a trilogy. And it's kind of funny that I pick him, and his toy was not in the show. He didn't make an appearance in Siege, but I think it has potential to be better.
Yeah,
I think it's a good start.
Springer, yeah, that's a good choice. I have almost exactly the same reasoning, but I would choose Grimlock.
Okay,
because Grimlock is a great character, but underused in the '86 movie, and has lots of hidden potential. But you don't see it, and there's lots and lots of little bits and bobs in Siege which I think could be great, but they never really properly kind of touch it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd put it at Grimlock, because Grimlock, solid character, bit of comic relief in that movie, bit silly, which Siege is not.
My optics!
Okay, so I think what we're basically saying is nice try, but must try harder with the next one, which is Earthrise. Comes out in 2 days.
Yeah.
Debuts on Netflix on 30th. Now, as I mentioned at the top of the podcast, all we've seen is a trailer, and obviously we've seen the toy line and we've seen what comes after it. So we've got some inklings. So maybe we should just talk a little bit about the trailer. What were your thoughts watching the trailer?
I really liked the choice of music in the trailer.
Oh, yeah.
Which gives me hope for better music in the next series. It felt like the stakes are going to be a little higher, and that the possibility of Prime's terrible leadership in trusting a different faction that he's just met out of the blue will not have the same type of impact it had in Siege. Like, at least he can learn from it and be like, okay, I've done wrong here. But the trailer itself was really good. I didn't think there was anything wrong with it. I liked what they showed of Cybertron with Megatron and the Elita 1, and then going back to whatever's going to be happening on this off-world planet. It's going to be good.
Well, yeah, I mean, just to kind of summarize what happens in the trailer, we've got the Autobots, the off-world Autobots, Prime and everybody who escaped on the Ark at the end of Siege.
Mm-hmm.
I think at the beginning they're all in manacles, and they seem to have been captured by a Quintesson. Maybe more than one, who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But there is something where I think the Quintesson says, "Do you know who I am?" And Prime says, "I know what you are." So it's interesting that they chose those words. So I'm not sure it's the Quintessons. I think it's a specific Quintesson.
That's interesting.
But I don't know what that means yet. But it's quite clear from what you see of that side, because you kind of flash backwards and forwards a little bit between what's happening on Cybertron and what's happening off-world.
Yeah. Which
is good. It's good that we're going to see both that. We're not just forgetting about the people on Cybertron. And we get a nice little bit with Elita 1. Basically, she's on, well, not on her own, but she's got a small crew of Autobots continuing to fight as a kind of resistance cell on Cybertron against the Decepticon forces. And you get, a nice kind of nod to the fact that Autobots generally can't fly, referring to Jetfire, obviously. But yeah, back to what's going on off-world. You see Prime and Bumblebee going through like a portal somewhere. Meanwhile, there's like a kind of voiceover from, I think it's the Quintesson, saying, basically talking about the future being unwritten, very Terminator 2.
The feeling that was from whatever Nemesis Prime they alluded to in that small bit while that voiceover was going on. But it may be Quintesson. I didn't think of it that way when I watched it.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, the Quintesson's voice is not too dissimilar to Prime's voice, so it's hard to... I mean, the Quintesson's got more than one voice as well, because...
That's true. Yeah.
There's a bit where one of the other faces talks and it has a different voice.
Yeah.
I think what we're probably going to see is this Quintesson sending Prime and his crew on a mission to retrieve the Allspark for them for some reason or whatever. They seem to be interested in the Allspark.
Yeah.
And going through these portals starts to suggest a bit of timey-wimey time travel or dimension hopping or whatever, which totally plays into the idea of a Nemesis Prime, totally plays into the idea of the bit that I like the most about the trailer, Galvatron and Megatron meeting
and having a conversation
and having a bit of a dust up and then having a bit of a chat. And it's probably wishful thinking on my part, but I'm hoping that there's a bit of a nod to like the UK comic book Target 2006, where Galvatron comes back from the future in order to escape the influence of Unicron, to try and change things so that Unicron doesn't end up enslaving him. Now, who knows? But there was a flash of Unicron in there.
Yeah.
We've got that bloody gigantic, great big toy coming out at some point. They're going to slap that in there. Not that any kid could even buy it now. So yeah, you've got Unicron there. You've got Galvatron, and there's a lot of talk of taking the Matrix. And we all know from the 1986 movie that the only thing that can destroy Unicron is the Matrix. So there's a whole bit about killing Prime and taking the Matrix for yourself, which I assume is someone talking to Nemesis Prime. But they could be talking to Megatron.
I thought it was Megatron because there's that. As soon as that's said, they show a shot of him like powering up.
Yeah, there is that. Yeah, it's kind of weird thing going on. They're like weird kind of power around him. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a very hopeful thing that could happen because it's not so much the sense of taking the Matrix and whatnot. It's the interesting bit is what if Megatron takes the Matrix and uses it for himself instead of giving it to this future version of Galvatron, or if it's from the future. If he's from the future.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm pretty sure Megatron says something like "I don't trust you" or something to Galvatron or something like that, and Galvatron's like, "Well, no, you shouldn't," or something.
I wouldn't trust anyone.
Yeah. So yeah, it's possible. I mean, that's it's not a prediction because my prediction is it will be less interesting than this. But what I would like it to be is it would be nice if Galvatron were, because they could just make Galvatron a separate character. Rather than being, because they've done that before.
They did it with Sound Blaster.
Yeah, they could just make Galvatron a separate character. But what I would like was if Galvatron is a possible future version of Megatron and has traveled back in time to steal or take the Matrix in order to defeat Unicron in the future. I don't know what's going on with Nemesis Prime. I don't like it.
Well, I wouldn't hold too much worry on that because, I mean, he was the spoiler box for the series, but that didn't really mean much for Siege. So
yeah, I think it might be. The fact that it's in the trailer worries me, but I think it might just be a bit of a red herring.
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
maybe we get a little bit of it and then it kind of goes away.
It might like be like Mirage in Siege where he just pretends to be a Decepticon for a little bit for no real reason.
Yeah. Another thing I really like about what we see in the trailer, and it's not 100% clear whether it's one or the other, but it looks like we either get some flashbacks to Prime and Megatron early on, or if this portal thing that we see is to do with like time travel or something, maybe Prime and B and whoever are traveling back to a time period where they get to observe whatever was happening at that time. Or maybe they have to influence events and change history in almost like a quantum leap kind of way.
Yeah. It kind of makes me want to have Gigawatt appear and have
yeah. I mean, I'm not sure how well that would work in this kind of slightly darker and grittier universe, but you could try that. For anyone listening to this who is not aware, Gigawatt is a kind of crossover with Back to the Future. But anyway, yes, I do think the trailer looks interesting.
My only worry from the trailer is the design of the 3D models. Like how we noticed that Bumblebee and RC are not based on a toy, so they look very different than everyone else. And it's the same with Galvatron is not based on a toy design.
No, he looks very G1.
He looks very G1. And in the same way, he kind of sticks out from RC and Bumblebee do. So there's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, for such an important character, who I imagine is still going to get a toy in the next line of toys.
Yes, Galvatron will receive a toy in the Kingdom line.
It's just a bit strange.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? It's so disjointed.
Because even the Coneheads in Earthrise have the Seeker body of Starscream, but they have the cone heads and they don't have where their wings are meant to be. Like it's...
I mean, you know more about this than I do because you actually buy this toy line.
Yes.
I have no idea what the cone heads look like. I have no idea that they're not based on the same body as
But
the
I mean,
sequels.
it because I remember when the first trailer for Siege came out, people were worried that they all had the massive backpacks and the ports and
Yes.
all the 3mm ports for all the different weaponizers and things, which seemed understandable at that point if you're going to do it for everybody. But if they're picking and choosing who matches that aesthetic and they don't even transform half the time anyway, what was the point?
My optics!
Right, well, I think that's quite enough of that. We hope you enjoyed our ramblings, and if you did, please do like and subscribe. Please check out our first episode straight after this in the feed, covering our thoughts on War for Cybertron Earthrise. We plan to do more episodes like this, reviewing shows, but also discussions on the larger fandom and the peculiar nature of collecting toys. In the meantime, you can connect with us on Twitter and Instagram. I am at Ghia Orion and Orion_Ghia, respectively. And Dave, do you mind imparting your details on these fine people?
Yep, you can follow me on Instagram at virtualdave26.
Thank you. Right, well, that's it. Thanks for listening. Please join us again next time on AARGH, My Optics.